let's review all 10 books I finished during the month of February. There are also like 7 that I ended up DNFing, so not finishing, and there are 3 that I'm currently reading. So let's get to it. So there were no 1 or 2 star this month, which I appreciate it, although a lot of kind of okay books, no hard feelings. Not everything you read is going to be an all-time favorites, but you can still get something out of it. But let's start with the 3-star rated books. The most disappointing book that I read this month would have to be When the Moon Hits Your Eye by John Scalzi. This book is not even out yet. This was an ARC advanced reader copy that's coming out at the end of March, and honestly, I would say skip it. I don't say that super often. I have enjoyed some of his other books. He tends to write quite funny, lighthearted sci-fi, and this one is no exception, but the premise was just too cheesy, literally. Basically, the moon turns into cheese. You don't really know why, and you're following the story for a little while, the consequences on humanity from different point of views. Honestly, there were too many point of views. Some of them I didn't care for. Towards the middle, I almost put the book down because I was kind of hating it, and then it got a little better. I pushed through because, again, it was an advanced reader copy, and I had enjoyed his other books, but I feel like for him, I almost enjoy the cozier parts of his books more than whenever they have to save the world. I don't know why. At this point, it's been like 3 or 4 books, and it's always been the same. So I enjoy his writing, I enjoy his humor, but yeah, the storyline was just meh, not for me. I did enjoy the epilogue, which I can spoil anything in the comment section. I try to keep the reviews as spoiler-free as possible, so I did enjoy that portion, but just enough to run it up to a 3. So yeah, probably my least favorite book of the month. But like 3 is not awful. I also finished the audiobook for Murder by Memory, which is also an ARC. The book is also coming out anytime now. And it was about 2 hours as an audiobook, so it's very short. And I wanted to get this one because I liked the premise. I feel like it's a concept that I've seen before and really enjoyed, and it is a murder mystery on a spaceship. I feel like it has that little added bonus that it has to be someone, you know, on the spaceship. I had read 6 Weeks, which I would recommend. It was, again, a fun concept. So I wanted to try this one. And again, it was kind of just okay, not awful, just not something I'll probably mention ever again. So in this future version, humanity, the leftovers, are in the spaceship trying to travel to a better place, and they're stuck there for years and years and years. So they get new bodies as they age, and they save their memory, and then someone is murdered. It has to be someone, so they wake up this detective, and she's the one trying to piece things together. So it was, again, fun in theory. In practice, it was fine. I did finish The Glass Sentence during my Read It or Haul It, which was the extreme declutter edition, because I was not in the mood to actually do the challenge because I was in the middle of a really good book, which I'm still in the middle of. We'll talk about that in a second. But this was, again, something that I would have loved if I had read it at the right age. So The Glass Sentence is a really interesting middle grade, I would say, fantasy series. This is the first book, and the concept, the world building is really well done. Basically, there was this great disruption that happened. You don't really know what happened. I'm assuming you're going to get answers throughout the series. And the planet, which is the same thing as our world, it's centered on the US, and every places is a different age. So depending, you know, the timelines, things have just changed, and the main character you're following, she is set in the 1800s. So there are explorers, cartographers, and her parents disappeared, and she wants to find them, get answers. So that's what you're following. Again, I think this is something I would have loved if I had read it when I was like 10 or 12, and it had been on my shelf for years and years and years. So I'm glad I got around to reading it, because once again, the world building is great. If that's something that you are into, I would recommend it. In the intro, like it mentions, one of the little shout outs compares it to Is Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, which I agree. And it's something that, once again, I read when I was 10, 12, and I would have loved this. So I'm not planning on continuing, but again, it's not the book's fault. It's just not the right audience or the right timing, really. The next book I read because it was one of your best books of 2024. So this is Blue Sisters, which I love the writing, but I found the story super depressing. Which, like, no offense, it's literary fiction. I feel like most of those books tend to be really depressing, and I wish I had been a little bit more invested. Basically, you're following these 4 sisters, the Blue Sisters, and one of them passed away a year ago, and you're following the 3 other sisters following the effects of the grief and a lot of addiction. Again, I'm going to keep it somewhat vague, but you're following the consequences, again, a year later for a few weeks, and they go back to their home where they grew up in New York, and a lot happens. They are a mess. So I was interested, but mostly because of the writing. I know the author came out with another book, and I think it's also equally depressing, so I might not pick it up, but if that's your thing, I did really love her writing, so I'm going to keep an eye out to see whatever she publishes next, and I might pick it up because I want to read more from her, but it has to be the right book. So not a bad book, just again, a little too heavy for me at the time. Middle of winter, I have to be a little bit more careful with what I read. So not a bad book again. I see why people loved it though. I did also listen to the audiobook Bury Your Gaze, which I had seen going around. I think this one is categorized as horror, and it's not usually my main genre, but I've been reading a lot lately and it's been going so far pretty well. But this one, I feel like I loved the social commentary of the author more than the actual story. So you found the story of this main male character who writes the script for Hollywood movie, TV shows, and he is told by the suits that he has to is two female characters of this show that he's writing because they just basically admitted that they're into each other. And of course, you can't have gay characters. So bury your gays. They're only allowed to come out if they're going to tragically die right after. And he refuses. So things start going wrong. And the characters, other like monsters that he wrote for other movies, end up starting to come after him. I'm keeping it somewhat vague. So the storyline wasn't my favorite, but again, I enjoyed the social commentary, so I'm giving it 3 because I enjoyed it enough to continue and finish it, but it just wasn't really my thing. So I've seen it going around a lot though. A lot of people did enjoy it. Okay, we're now at the 4-star. I have found some new favorites for sure this month and we're finally getting there. So the first one was one of your recommendation and the book that was one of your best of last year. And this is Listen for the Lie, which is a murder mystery, small town. Main character years ago was found covered in blood and her best friend was murdered, so everyone thinks she did it, but she was never really brought to justice because they have no proof. But you know, small town, so people gossip, and she doesn't remember what happened. She had a traumatic brain injury, or like she got hit really hard. So she moved away to avoid all of this, and then years later her grandma uses emotional blackmail to tell her, you know, I'm old, it's my birthday, come back home. And she goes for a visit, and turns out, coincidence, this man that has this really popular crime podcast is also in town, and he wants an interview. He wants to talk about this specific case, so he's interviewing everyone, and more information come out about what actually happened during that time. Will we get answer? Did she do it? Did she not do it? I really wanted to say thank you to everyone that told me that I needed the audiobook. So I got that one from the library, and yeah, I feel like it brought the book up to a 4-star. It was a good book, but the audiobook was amazing. The narration was done really well. There was a cast of character, and because part of it is told in a podcast format, it worked really well. You get the music and everything. So yes, enjoyed it. I enjoyed the tone. It's kind of light. I mean, it's a murder mystery, but it feels very popcorn read, and I had not been lucky with mystery thrillers in the last couple of years, and this was a really fun one. I do agree that small town, everyone has slept with everyone, and grandma slept with everyone too. So definitely not very serious, but I enjoyed having less serious books, especially after depressing ones. So this was enjoyable, and I would recommend. I understand why this one actually has a lot of hype. So I agree with you. This was good. Then I read another arc. There was definitely the month of advanced reader copies. So this is A Drop of Corruption. This was one of my most anticipated read of 2025, and it delivered. I really liked last year, The Tainted Cup, which is the first book in this adult fantasy series where you're following a character who has to solve murder mysteries. He is the assistant of Anna, who I keep describing her as like a female Sherlock Holmes, but like with magic. She's unhinged, let's just say it. She likes to stay in her room, but she will be the one figuring out what happened, and she sends him to do the interviews, look at the places, and he has some magic that is linked to scent, so he'll smell a scent and then associate it with everything, so he can recall everything that happened and tell her, and that's how she pieces things together. So book 1 was definitely a bunch of murder mysteries with magic involved and a lot of political intrigue, and book 2 is a locked room murder mystery, which again, I really like. This one, you're following the story of this king that was murdered. It happened in a small room. They were drinking tea, so it has to be someone who poisoned him, what happened. And you also start getting more answers about the world building, which I had a lot of question in book 1, because you have these leviathans, these big monsters that attack them every year. They've built this big wall in the north, but they get attacked every year and they're struggling to keep up. But at the same time, they use the blood of these magical giants to create their magic. So you're getting a little bit more answers in book 2, and I'm assuming we're going to keep getting more, and I'm assuming he can continue writing this for a while because there's so many things that he can write about. I'm sure there's more murder mysteries to solve, so I did really like it. I would highly recommend it. I think it's just a fun one, and again, I feel like fantasy doesn't have to always be super dark. I mean, I'm saying that there's a bunch of murder mysteries. But I enjoyed Anna. I feel like she makes the book worth it. I wouldn't want to follow the storyline through her eyes because, again, she's on edge, but she's entertaining, so would recommend this series. And I think my favorite book of this month would have to be this one. This is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, which is horror. This is what I'm saying. I've been reading a lot more, and I have been enjoying it. I think this is my favorite book by him at this point, and I like that he handled the topic well, which, let me rewind. You found a story of these young girls in 1970. They are pregnant. Their family, feeling the shame, sends them away to this home where they will be staying until they give birth, and then they can come back home afterwards and pretend nothing happened. And while they're there, some of the girls will be given this book, this magical book by a witch, and they will get some power. What will they do with it? Will they get revenge? Again, I'm going to keep this spoiler free. I can tell you more in the comment section. I'm a huge fan of witches, and I feel like there could have been more. I wanted more of the magic and witches, but I appreciated the way the author handled the topic. This is the second book that I've read that centers around teenage girls, and it would be so easy to go, pure misogyny, but he didn't, which again, the bar is extremely low, but nonetheless, it is appreciated. You can explore the topics of them feeling betrayed and feeling like they're the only ones having to suffer the consequences, right? And these girls are underage, and the men that got them pregnant, statistically speaking, still nowadays, are not usually minors. So you're kind of following them feeling these strong feelings and people treating them like crap. So yes, I did really enjoy it. I would recommend it, and I think it is his best book so far. I've given all 4 books that I've read by him 4-star, and they're all horror, which again is usually not my thing, but apparently it is. So would recommend him as an author. This was interesting. I was going to say fun. It was not fun. There were also some moments I was genuinely uncomfortable, which, like, horror, that's good. So I did finish 2 nonfiction books, which I don't really like rating my nonfictions, but I did really like both of them. So let me just review them. We have All in Your Head, which this one is about the way healthcare tends to treat women. The book is inclusive, but she mentions every chapter is basically a different disease, like, for example, endometriosis or PCOS. And the author is a doctor. She is an oncologist, so she is able to include some of the stories of her own patient. And I appreciated how she talks about the fact that, for example, women will feel the need to apologize, like they are being treated for cancer and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I look like crap, which, like, is crazy that we do that. I am Canadian, so I apologize just for existing, and it's literally a law that us apologizing is not an admission of guilt. So I do that a little too much. I'm trying to work on that. I think we could all work on that. She also mentioned things that I've had discussion with my doctors and they were just dismissing me, like the fact that I had tummy issues. We're going to go with that. And I mentioned that it seemed to be affecting my bladder. And of course, my doctor was like, that's not a thing. You have anxiety. And she mentions that it's a thing. And I'm like, so it was validating, if anything. And yeah, I enjoyed the way she, again, handled these topics. It was kind of light, but also serious and very informative. So I would recommend it. The only thing is, because I listened to it as an audiobook, I wasn't able to, like, pick and choose which chapters I wanted to listen to. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, it was good. The other nonfiction I finished was The Message. This is my second book by the author. He writes these really short books. This was 5 hours as an audiobook. And they're kind of mix of, like, they're essays and it's like memoir, but also talking about different topics. And at this time, he's answering questions that he's had his whole life, basically talking about how segregation in the US, the Jim Crow era, and comparing it to what's going on in Palestine. And he's talking about how in his travel there, the things that he has noticed. And I wanted to read this because I saw him in interviews and I felt like he handled those questions really well. So if you're interested, I would say it's worth it. It's like 5 hours too, so would recommend. And then I was mentioning I DNFed a ton of books this month. I just kept putting them down, which I'm learning to do. And, you know, it's helping slowly to learn that, let's be real, usually it doesn't get better. Like, as soon as I start feeling the feeling that I'm not enjoying it, I've forced myself so many times to continue that, again, I'm slowly realizing it never gets better. Don't do it. The only one I'm struggling with, accepting the fact that I might not finish it, is this one, because this was one of your best books of last year. This is The Spear Cuts Through Water. It is an adult fantasy standalone, and I keep saying how there aren't enough of these, and the premise sounded interesting. In this world, there's this god that is like imprisoned, and the main characters are gonna help them escape, but the writing, I cannot stand it. It's very, very flowery. I compared it a bit to like Erin Morgenstern. I feel like there's so much fluff, but like I read it and like I don't absorb anything. Like literally nothing. I put it down twice. I tried it twice, and the second time I put it down at page 32. I thought I made it to like 40 the first time. I don't remember. I just can't do it. It's not for me, and I need to just accept it, but I haven't yet because you guys love it. I want to love it, but if I put it down this early, it's not a good sign. So yeah, I don't know. We're just gonna move on. If you like very like heavy-handy, fluffy prose, this might work for you. I also need to accept that not every cozy book is going to work for me. One day I'll accept that, but I put down Welcome to the Yeonnam-dong Bookshop, which is another bookshop cozy book translation. I've read a couple Japanese translation. This one is a Korean one, and I wasn't feeling it. I just put it down. Your following character, she wasn't sure what to do with her life, and she opens this coffee/bookshop. She hires someone, and they're just kind of feeling lost, trying to find answers, and I was just bored. It's not even a long one, but I put it down about midpoint because, again, I was realizing you're not feeling it. Stop forcing yourself. You're just going to put yourself into a reading slump, which does happen. So yeah, I think I've accepted. I returned it to library, which is why I like getting books from the library whenever I can, whenever I'm not sure and want to get outside my comfort zone, because low stake, it's easier to accept. You know, I didn't spend 1 cent, so it goes back. And then I also put down 5 books during my Read It or Not challenge, which if you haven't seen that version, I'll put it at the end on the screen so you can click it, because I was very cutthroat. And you know why? Because I was in the middle of this book, okay, which is probably going to be a 5-star, and having to put it down so I could do the challenge made me very cutthroat. Like nothing was comparing. This is what I wanted to be reading, but I also wanted to do the challenge, obviously. So this is the book I'm currently in the middle of and truly enjoying it. This is the second book in this series. I read the first book last year, and I'm trying to learn to finish series before it's taken me, 10 years. So we're doing that. Adult fantasy, very classic fantasy. You have some great friendships. The magic system was interesting. You get some mysteries that are happening. You're finally getting more answers actually with the world of magic system, and it feels a bit like Chosen One, this darkness trying to come from the wall in north. I feel like I've read a couple books with that premise, but it works. I'm enjoying it, and yeah, I'm halfway through. I will finish it, but I finish in March because, girl. But it's 700 pages, so like, give me some time. But yeah, this is good. I'm also finally reading this, The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 4th and last book in the second Mistborn series by him. And listen, I read the first, I want to say 50 pages a little while ago, and you get pictures in this one. And I put it down because as much as I love what the author's doing with this world, because the first Mistborn series is like medieval inspired, and the second one is more like Western, which not really my thing. But I enjoyed the banter between characters. I enjoyed seeing what happens with the magic system whenever you start including, guns and like technology. And he's going to continue doing that, more in the future. That's why I have to finish it. Plus, I know the big reveal at the end, because there's always one, is going to be worth it. It's just, I'm not that invested in whatever the story is. That's why, for a 4th time, it's starting to feel a bit too much. That's why I decided, you know what, let's try the audiobook, see if it flows faster for me. The audiobook is 19 hours though, so faster is relative, but yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm making it sound like I'm hating it, but I know it's going to be at least a 3-star, but I feel like I'm more into overthrowing an empire from the first series than the pew pew, So yeah, not bad, but we'll see. I might change my mind before the end. Maybe. Oh, and this one is going to go back on the unhaul shelf because I am not keeping it, since I'm not going to continue the series, and I think I'm going to put it in a small little library because someone is going to be really happy to read this, because again, it's not a bad book, it's just I'm too old for it. I feel like I would have loved it back in the day. But yeah, I'm filling that unhaul shelf very fast. if you want to see how quickly I did it last week, which by the way, I'm continuing. I said I wasn't going to because I was scared it was going to put me in a reading slump, but I was still in the mood. So turns out my next video, my next vlog is going to be part 2 of this one, Extremely Clutter Edition. So I hope you're excited. I did find Finnegan of the Rock, by the way. If you want to see what else I'm planning in March, I will be putting my TBR right here, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.